All right, we're going to continue looking at political institutions by starting to talk about electoral systems and linkage institutions. This is an extension from the lectures posted last week on political structures when we talked about things like bureaucracies, legislatures, etc. So the first thing we're going to talk about are electoral systems, and these are rules that guide voting in three different ways. First, it determines the way votes are cast, how voting happens, how the votes are counted, and how those votes translate into seats in a legislature. This is what will allow us to look at how legislatures get built, how national executives may be elected or selected based on the system used by the regime. The first system that we'll talk about is referred to as either plurality voting or also first past the post. The three countries that we will discuss that utilize a first past the post system will be the UK and Nigeria, and then a good external comparison would be when we talk about United States electoral law in AP.gov. In a plurality or first past the post voting system, this is where the winner takes all. However, it's not a majoritarian system of elections. To win your seat, to win your election, you just have to have more votes than anybody else. There's not a threshold that says you have to have 50 or 51%. You just have to have more than second place. There is an exception in some nations to this majority rule that in elections where there are huge numbers of candidates, some countries will have a runoff to a second ballot. For example, Iran has a 25% threshold to move on to the second round. So if you have multiple candidates who meet that 25% threshold, then those people show up on a second ballot, which will then determine the winner of an election. In some of those systems that have a 25% rule or some kind of proportional rule, they will either take everybody or, like Iran does, they'll take only the top two candidates who pass that 25%, and then those two are the only people who can be voted for in the second round. Plurality systems or first past the post systems tend to use SMDs or single member districts, where candidates are competing for a single seat, and the voters only get to choose one person, vote for one person. So when you think about congressional districts in the United States, you only get to vote for your representative from your congressional district. That multiple people can run, but there's only one winner, and that winner needs to have a plurality of the vote. In theory, this electoral system leads to larger, more broad-based parties, more umbrella parties, because they have to cater to a wide variety of voters. If you think of the broad diversity of beliefs in the Republican Party in the United States, for example, they have to cater to multiple different types of conservatives to try and get them to all vote for the Republican candidate and not necessarily just a conservative candidate or a competing candidate with a similar ideology. Other explanations for why this umbrella party phenomenon is true is that no matter how many people run, the largest number will win. So the more attractive your platform is, the more likely you are to embrace more voters. If you have a larger base, you have a more active voting base, then you have more of a chance of winning. But if you support a smaller party, a third party, a minor party, with a less active base, then your candidate is less likely to win. If you want to, in addition to this video you see linked at the bottom, there will be a handful of other videos from CCP Gray highlighting different types of electoral systems that you can kind of look at your leisure. So you can watch this one on your own free time, looking at some of the problems with the first past the post system. A second type of electoral system is proportional representation. Russia uses elements of this. They changed to a mixed electoral system in 2016, but I think this is still kind of a good vehicle to look at. So the first kind of big difference between a first past the post system and a proportional system is that the number of people who can win from a particular district. For example, in a single member district, you're voting for one person to take the one seat from each district. In a proportional representation system, you tend to see this change, that you tend to see multiple people who are standing for election in a given area, in a given district, and multiple people can win. The other difference is that you're voting for a party, not for an individual. So if you want Republicans to win, you want independent candidates to win, if you want the Green Party to win, you vote for that party. The difference on how those seats are then selected will be based on lists created by individual parties. If there is an open list, then you as an individual have the ability to vote for both a candidate and a party. In closed lists, the party will pick from their hierarchical list. In some proportional representation systems, there is a minimum threshold, a minimum percentage of the overall vote that you need to get to have a seat in a legislature. The usual threshold is around 5% of the overall popular vote to be guaranteed at least one seat in a body. So in a proportional representation system, what your party wins, what percent of the popular vote they receive is the number of seats they get allocated to them. So for example, if there are 10 seats in a legislative body and a particular political party has 40% of the vote cast for them, then they'll get 4 of the 10 seats in that legislative body. This system in its purest form encourages a large number of smaller parties because they have a good chance of at least getting a handful of their candidates elected, that it's easier in multi-member districts for people to throw their support behind individual candidates from parties that might be a little bit more doctrine-based instead of umbrella-based. I want you to look at this question and pause the video and write a quick answer. I want you to tell me why you think proportional representation systems might encourage a multi-party system. Now that you've crafted your answer to this question, here are 4 different explanations as to why people might get elected. Again, a pure system allows for a large number of small parties because it's easier to have a minority voice, a smaller party voice, an alternate voice elected if you get to vote or select multiple candidates. Again, this is where the threshold is triggered, so if it's not a question of winner take all or some form of a first past the post, then if you are crossing that minimum threshold, then you probably get what you need to have at least one representative in a legislative body. If we were to talk about the advantages of a proportional system, we can find 3 pretty good ones. The first one is that minority interests tend to be represented, that smaller parties can now have a platform because they don't have to win a majority of the vote or a plurality of the vote to win all of the seats in a given area. That if they are winning a chunk of a local or national vote, they are guaranteed to be elected. Second is that women are more likely to be elected in a proportional representation system over a first-past-the-post system, and that and if you were to look at every country that has 25% or more of their elective legislators are women, every single one of those countries is uses a system of proportional representation. In countries that use mixed or first-past-the-post systems, you tend to see more men elected, so you can have in a PR system something that is more representative of the voting public. The last advantage of a PR system is that it kind of takes away the cult of personality from a particular individual or a particular candidate. That since the focus is on the idea, the focus is on the party, the focus is on the platform, that it becomes more of what you want legislated, not necessarily who you want tugging at the levers of power. There are two disadvantages to a PR system. The first is that critics will say that a PR system will disproportionately empower smaller political parties, that if they are winning a small threshold of the vote, that they may have they may be given more power than the percentage of the vote dictates. The second big criticism is that you tend to see extremist parties. You can see ethno-nationalist parties. You can see, groups founded on hate ideologies. You can find far left groups, far right groups in any of these PR systems, especially if there is a low threshold for what it takes for someone to win an election. We'll take a break there, and when we come back, we'll look at mixed systems and then types of elections.